What if I told you some of the biggest threats to the UConn Dynasty didn't come from South Carolina, Notre Dame, or Tennessee? They came from inside the roster? Because over the years, UConn Huskies WBB has had elite recruits, hype transfers, future pros, and top-ranked names walk into Storrs, only to leave before they ever became what fans dreamed they could be. And today, we're ranking the transfer stories that hurt the most, not because these players were bad people, not because they lacked talent, but because their exit struggles or mismatches crushed depth, changed rotations, and left Huskies fans asking one brutal question. What could this dynasty have been if they stayed?
Prime Field!
Prime Field fans, welcome back. Today we're going deep into one of the most fascinating parts of UConn history. The transfer misses, the early exits, and the what-if players who never fully became stars in Geno Auriemma's system. And with the Sarah Strong 2026-27 Revenge Tour now forming, this topic matters more than ever. And because while the rest of women's college basketball is living in the transfer portal, Geno is taking a very different route. Development, culture, international recruiting, and trusting the locker room. So today, we're counting down the UConn transfer stories that explain exactly why. Let's get into it. Before we start naming names, we have to understand the real villain in this story. It's not the player, it's not even the portal, it's the standard. At UConn, being talented is not enough. Being ranked in the top 20 is not enough. Being the best player on your high school team, your mid-major team, or even your conference is not enough. Geno Auriemma's system demands conditioning, spacing, decision-making, defensive discipline, unselfishness, and mental toughness every single day. And that's where so many players hit the wall. A player can arrive in Storrs as a star, then suddenly become the 8th or 9th option. A player can average a double-double somewhere else, then barely touch the ball at UConn. That's the system shock. And number one on that theme is Elena Adebayo. At Murray State, Adebayo was a monster. 18 points, 11 rebounds, 19 double-doubles. That is dominant. That is give her the ball and get out of the way production. But at UConn, 1 point per game, 2 rebounds per game, barely 6 minutes a night. That is one of the biggest statistical drop-offs you'll ever see. And Geno has always been skeptical of transfers for exactly this reason. His famous question is basically, if you're already starring somewhere else, why are you leaving? That sounds harsh, but in UConn terms, it makes sense. Because Storrs exposes everything: footwork, speed, processing, conditioning, confidence. Adebayo wasn't a problem. She wasn't a locker room issue. She was a mismatch. And that is what makes this list so interesting. Sometimes a player can be great somewhere else and still not fit UConn. Now let's talk about the front-court dreams that never fully happened. Because Huskies fans know this pain. You see the size, you see the ranking, you see the high school highlights, and immediately we start imagining the next Tina Charles, the next Steph Dolson, the next dominant UConn interior force. But then reality hits. Amari DeBerry came to UConn as a 6'6", top 15 recruit. On paper, she looked like the future. The size was there. The upside was there. The recruiting hype was absolutely there, but the role never came. She averaged just over 6 minutes a game at UConn, never became a consistent rotation piece, and eventually transferred to Maryland. And that's the harsh lesson. At UConn, size alone does not get you minutes. You have to run the floor and defend, communicate, screen, finish, and play with urgency. Then there's Ice Brady. And this one is different, because Ice was not a simple bust story. Not even close. Ice Brady was the number 5 recruit in the country. She had the frame, the skill, the pedigree, and at moments you could see it. Her 2024 Big East Championship performance against Georgetown, 13 points, 8 rebounds, 40 minutes. That was the flash. That was the moment Huskies fans said, okay, so here it comes. But injuries kept interrupting the story. A dislocated patella costed her a full season. Later, knee issues led to surgery in 2026. And after winning a national title with UConn in 2025, she transferred to Florida State, where she is expected to continue rehabbing before finally debuting later. So with Ice, this isn't about effort. It's about the most painful phrase in sports. What if? What if she stayed healthy? What if the knees held up? What if Sarah Strong had a fully healthy Ice Brady next to her in the front court? That could have changed everything. And now, as UConn builds around Sarah Strong, 2026-27, Olivia Vicosa, Maureen Dursis, and this new international wave, you can see why Geno wants durable, tactically mature players who can survive the daily grind. Here's where the list gets complicated, because some players didn't fail after leaving UConn. They exploded, and that almost makes it hurt more. Saylor Poffenbarger played only 12 games at UConn. 12, she scored 6 total points. Then she went to Arkansas and became a tough, versatile rebounding wing. Eventually, she reached the WNBA. That's not a talent miss. That's an environment miss. The pandemic-era campus, the isolation, the fit, it just didn't work. And sometimes, even at the greatest program in the sport, fit matters more than logo. Then there's Mir McLean. Huskies fans, remember the athleticism, the bounce, the energy, the offensive rebounding flashes? Mir arrived in that loaded 2020 class with Paige Nikamul and Aaliyah Edwards. That is a brutal roster to crack. She averaged only 2.5 points at UConn before transferring, but later at Virginia and Maryland, she became a double-double machine. In 2026, she helped Maryland in March with a 12-point, 14-rebound performance against North Carolina. That is the kind of stat line UConn fans once imagined, and Natalie Butler might be the wildest example of all. At Georgetown, she was Big East Freshman of the Year. At UConn, she became a reserve center, solid, useful, part of a championship program, but not a star. Then she went to George Mason and became a rebounding legend. 19 points, 16 rebounds per game, 33 double-doubles, and a WNBA draft selection. That is mind-blowing, and it tells us something huge. UConn's system doesn't always maximize individual statistics. Sometimes it suppresses volume in favor of precision. You don't get 20 shots just because you can score. You get touches if you make the right read, at the right time, in the right action. That wins championships, but for some players it also limits the breakout. Now let's rewind to the players who left so quickly. It almost feels like they were warning us about the future. Andra Espinoza-Hunter was a top 20 recruit and a dangerous shooter. She played 7 games at UConn. 7. Then she transferred, eventually finding success at Mississippi State and Seton Hall. Sadie Edwards, a local Connecticut guard from Meriden, played 6 games before leaving for USC, where she became a double-digit scorer. 6 games, 7 games. Today, in the transfer portal era, that kind of movement feels normal. Back then, it felt shocking. And then there's Michaela Coombs. Coombs was a top 15 recruit, an elite athlete, a respected teammate, and a strong defender. But offensively, it never clicked. She averaged under 1 point per game at UConn and eventually transferred to Georgia. The bigger story, UConn's 2017 recruiting class started falling apart. Lexi Gordon left, Andra left, Michaela left. Suddenly, Megan Walker was the only one left from that class. That matters, because every time a player leaves, it's not just about losing points. It's losing practice bodies. It's losing depth. It's losing insurance against injuries. It's losing the ability to survive a long March run. And Huskies fans know better than anyone. Sometimes the difference between a championship and heartbreak is not your best player. It's your 7th player. It's your 8th player. It's the player who gives you 8 tough minutes when someone is in foul trouble. That's why these exits hurt. Now we have to talk about the most famous departure in UConn history, Elena Delle Donne, the #1 recruit in the country, a generational scorer, a future WNBA MVP, and she was at UConn for about 48 hours. This is not a worse transfer in the normal sense. It's not a failure story. It's not something to mock. It's one of the most human stories in college basketball history. Delle Donne left because she needed to be closer to home and closer to her family, especially her sister Lizzie. And when you understand that, you cannot frame it as betrayal. You frame it as a young person choosing what mattered most. But from a basketball history standpoint, wow. Imagine Elena Delle Donne inside the UConn machine. Imagine her with that talent, that shooting touch, that size, that scoring instinct, surrounded by Huskies greatness. That is one of the biggest and alternate universe questions in women's basketball. How many more banners? How many more undefeated seasons? How much more terrifying would the Dynasty have become? We'll never know. And that's why this one still echoes. So why bring all of this up now? Because early June 2026 is a defining moment for UConn Huskies WBB. Sarah Strong is the superstar leader. The Final Four loss still stings, The revenge energy is real. And Geno Auriemma is making a clear statement. He is not chasing quick fixes. He is building. While other programs attack the portal, UConn is leaning into internal growth, health, and international recruiting. Marine Durses' Olivia Vicosa is coming. Giovanna Popovic adds another international piece. Morgan Shelley's health matters. Blanca Quinonez's recovery matters. Every practice rep matters. And Sarah Strong, she is the centerpiece. This is her team now, her standard, her leadership. Her chance to turn disappointment into dominance. And here's the emotional truth. All these transfer stories remind us that UConn's dynasty was never just about collecting talent. It was about becoming UConn. Not everyone can do that. Not everyone wants that pressure. Not everyone survives that daily standard. But the ones who do, they become legends. So when we look back at Evelyn Adebayo, Amari DeBerry, Ice Brady, Saylor Poffenbarger, Mir McLean, Natalie Butler, Elena Delle Donne, Michaela Coombs, Andra Espinoza-Hunter, and Sadie Edwards. This isn't just a list of players who left. It's a map of why UConn is different. Some were bad fits. Some were buried by depth. Some needed a different environment. Some were hurt. Some became stars elsewhere. And one made the most personal decision of all. But every story teaches the same lesson. At UConn, talent opens the door. Culture decides who stays. And as we look towards Sarah Strong, 2026-27, Geno Auriemma's next international class, in the next chapter of the UConn Huskies WBB Dynasty, the question is simple. Will this new group become the next wave of legends, or will history repeat itself? Huskies fans, I need to hear from you. Who is the biggest UConn transfer what-if of all time? Elena Delle Donne? Ice Brady? Saylor? Mir? Someone else? Drop your answer in the comments. And if you love UConn women's basketball, Sarah Strong updates, recruiting breakdowns, and dynasty debates like this, hit like, subscribe, and turn on notifications. Because the offseason may be quiet, but the revenge tour is already loading.
Prime Field